All right, let's get more now from Kyiv. I want to go to our correspondent, Nimisha Jaiswal. She is standing by for us. Nimisha, we just heard from the Ukrainian president, and I dare say that President Zelenskyy is not a happy man tonight, is he?
Well, Brent, that would be a safe guess. If we heard him talk a bit longer in those comments, he closed them with saying there will be no Minsk III. Now, this was a reference to the first two Minsk agreements of 2014 and 2015. These were international agreements that were designed to bring peace or at least a ceasefire to the Donbass. And we have seen how that has gone. And this is exactly Zelensky's point, that this is not a man to be negotiated with. And this, at the earlier Minsk agreements, the OSCE was there, France was there, Germany was there. But again, like I said, we see what happened. Just last week, we had Zelenskyy telling European leaders this is not a time to hug Putin. Some of you have been hugging Putin for the last 20 years, and look where that's brought you. And in this call between Scholz and Putin, we had Putin telling Scholz that he would be open to negotiations as long as new territorial realities were acknowledged. These are Putin's words, and this is exactly what Kyiv fears, that Russia and Moscow would continue asserting claims over the four regions of of Ukraine that they want.
Yeah, you know, speaking of realities, it's been just a little over a week since Donald Trump was elected to a second term as president. You know the situation of the German government. Zelenskyy looking at all of this and saying this phone call is playing into the hands of Putin. You're opening a Pandora's box. Do you think his concerns, are they valid at this point?
Well, that's exactly the context that make these concerns, that strengthen these concerns, right? We have over here in Kyiv, every single Trump appointment is being closely scrutinized. We had Tulsi Gabbard coming up as the U.S. intelligence chief most recently, and we had many people here raising concerns that she is a Putin apologist. And today Zelenskyy said in an interview that he believes that the war will be ended fast, according to what Trump and his team wants. But this is also a time when these two strongest allies, as you pointed out, are going through a period of flux. What they want from the outgoing leaders right now, from Scholz, from Biden, is to back away from their stance of caution that has been so heavily criticized here. They want those longer range missiles. They want that NATO membership to get rolling. Of course, we don't see that coming yet. And I also want to point out that this comes at a time when drone attacks have increased tenfold. Things are coming. Russia is gaining ground on the front lines on the east as well. And we, at a time when, of course, Russia is losing a lot of troops as well, but it's trying to make the point that this war is unwinnable. Kyiv, of course, hopes that it would not be forced into capitulation. It hopes that Trump will throw caution to the winds and arm Kyiv to the teeth if Putin refuses to negotiate. But this may well turn out to be hopeful thinking.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. PW's Nimisha Jaiswal in Kyiv with the latest tonight from Ukraine. Nimisha, thank you.
I'm joined from Washington now by Christine Betzina, Managing Director of the German Marshall Fund North. Welcome to DW, Christine. Why is Scholz speaking to Putin now?
The end of this year and really the last few weeks have changed the political realities both in Germany and in the United States. And there is a process of coming to a head of a question of, well, what happens next in Ukraine? President Trump, now reelected in the United States, has promised to bring a swift end of the war. And this will, of course, mean a greater burden eventually for Europe, because Trump's desire to pay significantly for Ukrainian security or Ukrainian reconstruction is very limited. The European role must be bigger. And so Scholz, now also facing very challenging political winds in Germany, will have to have a say and have to have a better understanding about what happens next in European security. And since rumors then of a possible phone call between Putin and Scholz, now given these changing political realities, have actually come to fruition. And we have seen the first in-depth conversation, the first publicly announced conversation between Putin and a Western leader, which means we are entering a new phase of conversation about the future of European security.
And what does Putin get out of his phone call, out of this phone call? He's not likely to stop the war because Olaf Scholz said he should.
Not at all. And so I think that the question here is like who benefits? And Putin right now is receiving ever more attention. We have seen the fact that Putin is ever more normal on the international stage. He can now receive Putin-Scholz and hear out the others and make sure his perspective is seen. At the same time, he also recently had a BRICS summit in Russia in which he feted so many world leaders. Putin is benefiting more. The question is, even if Trump would like to have a conversation at a peace table between Russia and Ukraine, is Russia ready to have that peace conversation on terms of any kind? And I'm not sure that the international community or other leaders yet see that Russia is willing to stop, that Russia is willing to take a break, or that Russia has any interest in peace at all. Putin has an interest in making sure that Scholz and any Western leader understands his perspective and Russia's ongoing goals in Ukraine. But does that mean that a phone conversation takes something one step closer to a peace negotiation? I think that would be a mistake to assume at this point.
Interesting. Now, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has sharply criticized that call, accusing Scholz of playing into Putin's hands. This is what he said.
Chancellor
Scholz told me that he was going to call Putin. Olaf's call, in my opinion, opens a Pandora's box. Now there may be other conversations, other calls, just a lot of words, and that is exactly what Putin has long wanted. It is extremely important for him to weaken his isolation of Russia and conduct any talks as ordinary discussions, which won't have any results. That's the way he's done it for decades.
Do you think his concerns are legitimate?
I think the fact that you see people dying every day in Ukraine mean that Zelensky's concerns are legitimate. The worst case of what could happen right now is the beginning of these conversations, providing cover for Russia to keep going incredibly aggressively in Ukraine, and the notion of peace being possible or an understanding or hope thereof in the West would limit further assistance and military assistance to Ukraine. Do these conversations give the aura of cooperation while militarily and in terms of human cost, Ukraine suffers? That is a fear that Zelenskyy could well have, and I think is a very valid one. If conversations continue, as they are expected, between Western leaders and Putin, does that also come with resolve, with military assistance, with financial assistance that not only provides an access point for Putin, but provides significant assistance for Ukraine to be protected and to attain its own aims? If the West is in fact on Ukraine's side and seeks to bring an end to this in the best situation for Ukraine, it can't just be conversations with Putin. It really must be substantive aid.
Well, last month, Scholz expressed skepticism over early NATO membership for Ukraine. Can there be a peace deal where NATO membership for Ukraine is ruled out?
It's very difficult right now to say that it would at all be fair to Ukraine to take this off the table. On the one hand, it is hard to anticipate how in Berlin or in Washington or in many capitals around NATO states there could be a swift accession for Ukraine into NATO. But the NATO question and the question about whether Ukrainians can in fact choose their destiny and choose to say we wish to be on the NATO side, we wish to be part of Euro-Atlantic security and economic institutions, is this not something that they have been fighting for the past over 2 years and really over a decade when you look back to Crimea? And making sure that there is a prospect for that, if not the end of this year, if not in the next year or two, but that this is something that Ukrainians will see in the next few years, in the next decade, as they stabilize, as they economically recover, as they rebuild their country. If that is not an option, I think there are many questions about what the fight would have been worth. And so the stakes for Ukraine to still have a future in NATO are incredibly high. But Russia's pushback on this issue will be tremendously great, because specifically the question of Ukraine and NATO was part of Putin's objections even before the full-scale invasion. So again, is it worth it for Ukraine? Does Ukraine have a future in NATO? This will be core, and it's not something that will be easily resolved. And the stakes, really, the emotional, psychological stakes of what is the value of having fought are going to be tied to this question.
Mm-hmm. That's Christine Bedzina, Managing Director of the German Marshall Fund North. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Now, Ukrainians living near the front lines still face relentless Russian attacks. 10 villages in the Kharkiv region are under evacuation orders as Russian troops push forward. Orders also cover villages further north. Some 6,500 people have left their homes in the last 2 months. Villagers in Pushki-Radkivsky are hoping to avoid being occupied by Russian troops for the second time.
Olha Rivchak is packing her most treasured possessions.
These are the photos I will definitely take.
Memories of happier times to bring with her when she leaves her home. She will have to leave most of her belongings behind.
All our lives we've been striving to have something, and today we sold a cow. We have no pension, no salary. She was our breadwinner.
All of the roughly 2,500 residents of the village of Pushki-Radkivsky have been told to evacuate. The front line is currently 20 kilometres away and is getting closer. Local houses bear the scars of recent shelling. Katerina Shapovalova says her 6-year-old son has learned how to distinguish between the sounds of Ukrainian and Russian gunfire.
We told him it was far away, that it would not reach us, but worryingly the children became even more anxious.
When it's very strong, it's scary, and when it's not very strong, it's not scary. The village was under Russian control for several months at the beginning of the war, until it was liberated by Ukrainian troops in September 2022. Residents here don't want to experience occupation for a second time, so many are packing up to leave, unsure if and when they will be able to return home.